Welcome to Spectral Shadows. This is the place where the stories don't just haunt your mind, they follow you into the dark. Before the whispers begin, tell me, where are you watching from and what time is it? Midnight? Or closer to the hour when shadows move on their own? If you're brave enough to continue, prove it. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows and leave a comment with your time and location, so we'll know exactly where to find you. Now, let's open the door to tonight's nightmare. Story number 1. So it's been a few days now, and I've noticed some strange things. I mean, apart from the actual fucking rapture happening, leaving me, as far as I can tell, the last man on Earth. Well, the last sane man on Earth. I think I'm sane anyway. Admittedly, I did spend the first, let's say roughly 36 hours, in a drunken haze. I remember going through cycles of crying myself to sleep and laughing at my predicament until I passed out. Needless to say, I was not in the best state of mind. But then, what would you do in my place? I think you could handle it any better. Actually, the only reason I eventually sobered up was that I ran out of alcohol. I woke up late Thursday morning with a pounding head and a swirling gut. I stumbled my way to the bathroom of the small house I had been renting with my girlfriend. She was gone now, just like everyone else. As I leaned over the toilet, voiding out my insides, I felt the reality of my situation creeping back in. Not long after, the shakes started up. I flushed and hurried to the fridge. I needed a drink before I broke down again. I flung open the fridge door and felt my stomach drop. There was nothing left. No beer, no wine, nothing. I screamed in frustration as I slammed the door closed. God damn it. I tried to compose myself. I really did. Instead, I broke down again. When I was done with my momentary pity party, I grudgingly decided it was time for a supply run. We needed groceries badly before all of this, and along with the drinking, I had done quite a bit of emotional eating as well. Half a bag of stale Fritos, the rest of mine and Yen's leftovers from the pizza place, and several bowls of cereal with questionable milk. So, I threw on my bathrobe, climbed into my truck, and headed to the store. My local grocery store would have beer and frozen food, but if I went ahead and drove 15 minutes to the next town over, they had an actual liquor department in their grocery store. That seemed well worth the drive to me. On the way, I cycled through radio stations, hoping and praying to hear a voice, even if it was just some pre-recorded message. But there was nothing on, nothing but dead air. I couldn't stand the silence, so I reached under my seat. After a bit of fumbling, I found my CD case and slid in one of the discs. It was an old mix I had made in high school. Metallica, Radiohead, Black Sabbath, and Nirvana. I swerved and weaved between stalled cars on the highway as Creep blared through my truck speakers, loud enough to wake the dead. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking. About 10 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of the big grocery store. Not worrying about the shopping cart crunching under my wheels, I backed right up the door of the store and stepped out onto the empty lot. I noticed a small dog a few yards away, sniffing at a dropped purse. It was a corgi, and it wore a leash the same shade of pink as the purse. I started to walk on into the store, but hesitated. If the dog ran off with the leash still on it, could get tangled up or trapped. Maybe if it was friendly, I'd keep it. After all, I was alone now, and dogs are supposed to be man's best friend, right? I stepped over to the dog, which eyed me curiously. It's okay, girl. I'm gonna take care of you now. But as I got closer, the dog lunged back, snarling and barking. What the hell? I thought. I had never had a dog respond to me like that. I love dogs, and they usually love me. Maybe she was just freaked out from what was happening. I knew I was. "Easy, girl. I'm not gonna hurt you," I said softly as I crouched down, trying to seem unthreatening. The dog barked and snarled as it backed further away, but it couldn't go anywhere very fast. The leash was actually fixed to the heavy purse. As quick as I could, I reached down and grabbed the purse, pulling the dog towards me and into my arms. It snarled and snapped, trying to bite at my face, but I managed to get the collar unfastened. I dropped the dog and stepped back, watching as it took off running and yipping in fear. Poor thing, I thought. It must be terrified. I watched it continue running as fast as its little legs could carry it until it disappeared around a corner. With that over, I turned and headed inside the store. I was glad the power was still on as I made my way down the aisles. I hadn't even thought about bringing a flashlight. That thought led me to wondering, how long would the power stay on? With no one to maintenance the grid, it would only last a couple days, right? Maybe a week tops. I decided that however long it was on, I was going to enjoy drinking my beer cold while I could. I was halfway through a six-pack. When I made it to the exit, my cart filled with booze, Hot Pockets, and various other unhealthy items. I even had a carton of cigarettes. I don't even smoke, but I figured now was probably one of the best times to start. I was in the middle of wondering if and where I could find some drugs. I had never done any drugs before, aside from a little pot when I was younger. When my eyes caught something across the street, it was the mall, the same mall where I had met Jen. Jen. I felt a hitch in my chest as the pain started up again. I bit down on it and downed another beer. I looked at the mall again, shaking thoughts of her from my mind. The food court had the best soft pretzels in the state. I sniffed and pulled a bottle of Kentucky bourbon from my cart and headed across the street. Walking through an empty mall in the middle of the day is unsettling. After raiding the food court for the now very hard pretzels, I stumbled aimlessly from store to store. I rode the escalators up and down over and over again. There was evidence that people were here. I saw plates of food unfinished on the food court tables, bags of purchased items littered all around the floor, and a few abandoned strollers. What happened? I mean, really, what the actual fuck happened to everyone? And why hadn't it happened to me? I looked up at the roof skylights. "Why?" I shouted. "What did I do?" I screamed to a god who had clearly abandoned me. I was answered only by my own voice, echoing through the empty mall. About half of the bottle was gone when I stumbled into the movie theater. I found myself wishing I knew how to run a projector. There were a few movies on here I wanted to see, but at the time I was too far gone to even attempt figuring it out. Instead, I filled a bucket of popcorn and made my way into one of the auditoriums. I plopped down into what I thought was the best seat in the house, absolute center of the theater. I stared up at the blank silver screen, thinking back to all the movies I had seen here, with my dad, with my friends, with Jen. Tears burned in my eyes as I ate my stale popcorn and drank my bourbon. Sometime later, I woke up and didn't immediately know where I was. The dim theater lighting seemed strange and alien. I climbed to my feet and let the empty bottle I was holding clatter to the floor. Suddenly I remembered. It all came back in a flash. I was alone, and just like that, I felt the shakes coming on again. I left the mall and made my way back to the grocery store. The frozen food I had collected was now a soggy mess. I wondered how long I was gone. Checking the clock on my truck dash, I realized it was quite a while. It was 9:26 a.m. I had left my house around noon yesterday. I shook my head and started to chastise myself for my degenerate behavior, then shrugged it off. Who the fuck would care now anyway? There was no one left to judge me. After another round of grocery shopping, more booze and hot pockets, I climbed back into my truck and headed for home. When by some miracle I made it back home in one piece and unloaded my supplies, I remembered something. The dog from the grocery store and the way it had been stuck on the leash. I knew that some of my neighbors had dogs and cats, and I still kind of wanted a pet. At least then I wouldn't be completely alone. I made my way around the neighborhood, checking the houses for trapped pets. Some were already gone from when I had broken in before, but the others, they reacted to me exactly like the dog from the store. Mrs. Smith's Chihuahua was terrified of me. The Ryan's golden retriever snarled at me like it wanted to bite my head off. I couldn't understand it. Those dogs had always been so friendly. I had brought Churro home to Mrs. Smith after he ran off dozens of times, and the Ryans always walked Goldie around without a leash. Their behavior, even under the circumstances, just made no sense. Unless the lyrics to the song I had been listening to on the way to the store came back into my mind. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. I don't belong here. They knew. The animals, they knew. Something is wrong with me. I don't belong here. Not anymore. I finished making my way around the neighborhood, propping doors open. The animals could come and go as they pleased. I wouldn't bother them. Finally, I made it back to my house and stepped inside. With nothing else to do, I threw a hot pocket into the microwave and started in on the next case of beer. I hadn't realized that I left my front door wide open, not until I heard the noise of something scuffling slowly across the floor. I felt a momentary spark of excitement, thinking that just maybe one of the dogs had calmed down and sought me out. I stepped around the corner to the front door and froze. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. It was a man. He was bald, broad-shouldered, and wearing a dirty, rumpled gray suit, and he was standing on all fours, staring up at me like a deer in the headlights. I wanted to speak, to ask him who he was or where he came from, or what happened to everyone else, or any of the dozens of other questions I'd had since this started. But I couldn't find my voice, and even if I could, I didn't want to. In that moment, I was more afraid of him than I was of being alone. We stood there staring at each other, neither of us daring to move. Then the microwave dinged, and the man went into a panicked frenzy. He screamed in a deep, throaty howl as his face contorted in anger. I began to back away, but then he lunged at me, his fingers hooked and his teeth chattering. I screamed and fell back hard onto my ass. I scrabbled back out of his reach as he pounced at me again and again, but I couldn't get away. He grabbed me, slammed me back against the oven, causing a cast iron skillet that I had used and never washed to fall to the floor. I reached for the skillet with my right arm as I used my left to keep his gnashing teeth away from my throat. As I felt my fingers fumbling the handle of the skillet into my hand, my left arm erupted into a white-hot pain as he bit down on my forearm, shaking his head side to side like an animal. I swung the skillet with all of my strength, bashing in one side of his forehead. Blood spattered across the floor as he let go of me and whirled away, trying to find his balance. I quickly stood and brandished the skillet in front of me like it was Excalibur. "Come on, motherfucker. You want some more?" I shouted, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. In truth, I was petrified. I felt like I was about to pass out. Luckily for me, he didn't want any more and quickly ran out the door, still on all fours. I ran over and slammed and locked the door, gasping for air. I watched him through the window as he made his way to the woods behind my house. The whole way, he kept on shooting angry and confused looks back at me. Later, as I sat on my bathroom floor, I examined the bite he had taken out of my arm. The teeth went deep and the bleeding hadn't yet stopped. There was about a quarter-sized chunk of my arm meat missing. I felt sick thinking about where it was now. I had a brief moment of concern about turning into whatever he was, but dismissed it. That shit only happens with zombies, right? He didn't seem like a zombie, didn't really seem all that human anymore either. I thought about that as I disinfected and wrapped my arm with gauze and tape. There was something in his eyes, something primal, something feral. That's when it hit me. There was no humanity behind his eyes, no soul. They held intelligence, sure, but more like a savage and cunning intelligence, like a predator. He looked at me exactly like the animals did, with fear and confusion. I didn't drink any more that night. I went to my closet and pulled out my grandfather's hunting rifle, a lever-action .30-30. If he came back, I'd be ready. I'm not as alone here as I thought, and I don't belong here. Story number 2. It was $15, a steal. My wife and I had needed a cabinet for almost 3 years. We lived in a small apartment without much closet space. We had married young, and financially we were still on shaky ground. She was in school. I was just starting my job as a copywriter for a local business. So when we saw a cabinet on Facebook Marketplace that wasn't upwards of $700, my wife literally jumped for joy. When I went to pick it up, the guy selling it was nervous. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, and he kept biting his nails. His hair was a rat's nest, and he breathed quick, always glancing over his shoulder. I passed over the $15 cash, and he took it like a starving child grabbing a dinner roll. Need help getting it in the car? It was hard to understand him with his fingers in his mouth. I got it. I bent down to lift it. The cabinet was a small thing, plain, white, 3 feet square at the opening and 2 feet deep. It looked like it weighed 20 pounds, soaking wet. I put my fingers under the edge and lifted up. It wouldn't budge. I grunted in surprise and pulled harder. The thing felt like it was full of bowling balls. "Geez, is there something in here?" I opened the doors to check. Empty. The guy looked at me, his cuticles against his teeth, gnawing. He shrugged and bent down to help. It took us 3 tries just to get it in the air. When it was finally in the trunk of my used 2003 Ford Transit, the suspension in the back groaned. The car slipped down on the back tires an inch or 2. I opened up the driver's side, but the guy stopped me. "Hey." I looked at him, 1 foot already in the car. "You got padlocks?" No, don't think so." The guy bounced on his heels. I saw the dark circles under his eyes. He was making me think I shouldn't have responded to that post so quickly. "Buy some, on your way home." "Oh, okay." I got in the van, flicked it into drive, and practically peeled out of the parking lot. The cabinet in the back made the entire car bounce each time I went over a speed bump. I saw the seller guy in my rearview mirror, watching the car as it pulled out of the apartment complex lot. I couldn't be sure, but it looked like he was crying. When I got home, my wife was ecstatic. She wouldn't stop running her hands over the smooth wood and gushing about how it fit perfectly with the color of our bedroom. It took some doing to get it in the door. The son of a bitch still weighed a ton, but we made it happen. She wasted no time, filling the small container with clothes, pants, and folded shirts that had been falling out of our overcrowded dresser for the past 3 months. Helping her place the stuff inside of the cabinet, I felt pretty proud of myself. I forgot all about the weird seller guy, how heavy the thing was, and all the pangs of unease I had experienced earlier. I was a good husband, and our house was a little more organized. In the chaos that was our lives, this was a victory. It was about a week before I noticed the clothes on the floor. My wife's not the most organized person. When she takes off an article of clothing, it usually travels to a few different locations before it finds a home in the laundry hamper. One of her favorite alternates is the floor. So when I found all the clothes that had been in the cabinet on the carpet of our bedroom, I didn't really think anything of it. I just put them in with the rest of the laundry, cleaned them, folded them, and put them back in the cabinet. Halfway through the next week, I saw those same clothes on the ground. I looked in the cabinet and saw it was empty. I called to my wife in the next room. "Babe, if you're gonna try stuff on in the morning, can you make sure and put it back?" She came into the bedroom and looked at the pile of clothes. "I didn't try those on. Did you push them out when you were getting your stuff?" "I don't have stuff in there. Let's just keep things organized, please." She refused to acknowledge that she was the one who put them on the ground, so I dropped the point. Didn't want it to spiral into an argument. We put the clothes back and went on with our day. That night, we left to go out on a little date. I had gotten a commendation at work for wowing a client, so we felt like celebrating. When we came back, we were a little bit drunk from the bar, so it wasn't until the next morning that I even saw what had happened in the short time we had been gone at dinner. I turned over in bed, hungover and bleary-eyed, and stared at the ground for what felt like a full minute. The clothes were on the floor again. It was Saturday, so instead of doing grocery shopping, fixing the stove, or any of the other million chores on my unending list, I started messing around with the cabinet. I checked the legs, seeing if there was a tilt that might be making the clothes spill out. No dice. I checked the floor level. The bubble floated dead center between the two black lines. I tried to think if I had accidentally bumped the doors last night while I was getting undressed. It was hard to remember. Everything was hazy through the alcohol. I remember the guy I brought it from, how he fidgeted and swayed on the spot. "You got padlocks?" I shook my head. I was going crazy. It probably had something to do with the door and the way the clothes were stacked. Instead of putting the clothes back in, I piled them on top of the cabinet. After a day or two of the clothes not magically making their way onto the floor, I figured the problem was solved. Then the weird stuff started. I would come home from work, and drawers would be open in the kitchen. I assumed it was just my wife and I forgetting to close things. Then things would start rearranging themselves all throughout the house. Books in my bookshelf would get shuffled around. I would go looking for the plates, and they would be in a different place than before. I blamed my piss-poor memory. Food started going missing. My wife would swear she didn't eat it. Sometimes I would wake up at night and not be able to go back to sleep. I know it sounds crazy, but it felt like someone was watching me somewhere in the darkness. I started to be suspicious of the cabinet. Lack of sleep inhibits brain function. You do things you wouldn't even consider if you were well rested. I examined every inch of that stupid thing. I knocked on the back, the sides, the top. I even stuck my head inside and looked around. It was a normal cabinet in every single way, other than the fact it weighed the same as a low-end NFL football player. I thought about moving it out of our bedroom, but my wife wouldn't hear it. Where else would we put the clothes? I tried to tell myself that it was nothing, that I was being paranoid, but still, I couldn't help staring at it when I was in the room. Sometimes I'd even fall asleep looking at it. The image burned onto my eyes after they had closed, its white shape working itself into my nightmares. It was getting ridiculous, so I did something a bit crazy. You know those motion-sensing cameras? I set one up in our bedroom. I ended up dropping way more money than I should have, but I was desperate. I hid it behind a picture frame so my wife wouldn't see it. It was hooked up to my phone and would send videos if it recorded anything. I would turn it on at night and examine the footage at work. For 2 days, it got nothing but clips of my wife and I turning over in our sleep. On the third morning after its installation, I got up late. I had to rush to the office. My wife was under the weather, so she was staying home from classes. I air-kissed her goodbye as I went out the door. I didn't even bother to check my phone. I saw the notifications only when I sat down at my desk. The camera had recorded 3 videos. I pressed play on the first bit of footage. As I pulled up the projects I would be working on that day, I kept my phone in the corner of my eye. The stuff I saw at first was normal. Me and my wife, tossing and turning in bed. When that ended, I opened the second video file. While it played, I looked over a calendar filled with work meetings for the month. I was rescheduling an appointment with a low-priority client when I saw a flicker on my phone. All my attention left my work. I picked it up and looked deep into the small screen. In the video, the doors to the cabinet were opening. It was a slow process. They moved outward, centimeter by centimeter. Once they had fully swung out, I saw movement in the dark space inside. 2 long, spindly hands crept out of the interior. They were followed by thin arms, then a head and neck. I'd never seen anything like it before. Its eyes were bulbous and glowing in the infrared. Its mouth was wide and toothy. It pulled itself out of the cabinet and crept along the floor. It was pale, fleshy, with sharp toes. It must have been 8 feet long. It reared up on its haunches. Its head almost brushed the ceiling. It stared at me and my wife, sleeping peacefully. The video ended. I fumbled with my phone to get to the third video. Once I had the file up, I pressed play. The thing from the cabinet filled the screen. It was staring directly into the lens, its eyes watery and leaking. Its smile grew wider than before, and I saw its lips tear open and leak black fluid. For 10 seconds, the thing and I engaged in a quasi-staring contest. I ran out of my chair, ditching all my stuff at my desk. I dialed my wife, ignoring co-workers who were asking where I was going. My wife's phone rang, and rang. I worried I would be shunted to voicemail. I heard a click, and her voice came through. It was thin and croaky from her sickness. "Honey? What? Baby, I need you to get out of the house." "What? Why? What's?" "Get out of the house now. Go to the store across the street. Stay there until I call you. I think there's something in our bedroom cabinet." "Honey, slow down. What's going on? You're scaring me. Please listen to me. There's something in our bedroom cabinet. You need to get out of the house and get to the store across the street. I promise I will explain when I get home. Just pretend like nothing's wrong and leave." There was a long pause on the other end. Then finally, "Okay, be safe. I'll call you soon." I waited until I heard my wife hang up. Then I dialed 911. I swung myself into my car. The operator answered. "911, what's your emergency?" Something's in my house. I think it's dangerous." I tried to start my car. For a horrific moment, I heard the engine stall. On the second try, it turned over, and I almost cried in relief. "Please stay calm, sir. Can you tell me exactly what is in your house?" "It was this. It's long. It has sharp. It came out the cabinet. I think it's been coming out for weeks." Sweat was building up on my forehead. I pulled out of the parking lot with a shriek from the van's tires and sped towards home. "Is it an animal?" "Is it an... I don't think so. It looked like a fucked up person." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Sir, are you on any sort of medication for a mental condition?" "What?" "No." I pulled out of the parking lot and onto the road. "Are you at your house now?" "I just saw it on camera. I'm driving home. I'm not crazy." "I believe you, sir." Their tone of voice made me doubt it. "Can you give me your home address?" I gave it to her. I honked at someone going 20 in the 35. Anxiety made my head feel like it would explode. There was a gap in traffic, and I weaved past the slow car. I heard the suspension of the van groan in protest. "Okay, we're sending an officer now. Hang tight." Click. I chucked my phone into the passenger's side. The 10-minute drive home felt like 10 years. After hitting what felt like every red light, I finally saw my crappy duplex in the distance, standing there peaceful and serene, like it didn't have some terrifying abomination hidden within. I slammed into the driveway and didn't even stop to put the car in park. I sprinted up the walk. The front door was open. The house was silent. I tentatively stepped in. I guessed my wife hadn't had time to shut the door before she left. I looked around, trying to see if anything was out of place. I slipped into the garage and grabbed a few things, making as little noise as possible. Then I tiptoed into the bedroom. No one was there. The cabinet was waiting in the corner, its doors neatly closed. I approached it, doing my best to not let the objects in my arms make noise and give me away. I crouched next to white, cube-like piece of furniture. I took a piece of wood I had gotten from a scrapped project and positioned it over the top of the two doors. I took the drill I had gotten from the garage and positioned a screw. I knew once I started, I would only have a few seconds before it would hear me and try to stop what I was about to do. I held my breath and screwed in one side of the wood. It made a squealing sound like a stuck pig as it went in. It bit into the wood and was soon buried up to its head. I rummaged in my pocket for the next screw. I heard something, a sound of scratching coming from the cabinet. I didn't stop to check what it was. I took the second screw and sent it into the wood. A thump came from the cabinet, like someone was knocking on the other side of the door. I was running out of time. I went to position the other plank of wood, but the cabinet doors jumped. Something on the inside was slamming into them. I put my weight against them, readjusted the wood, and pressed against the new screw. It went in, but there was another hard hit from the inside. I saw the first plank start to splinter. I got the second screw in place, but then it was knocked askew by another hit. There were large cracks in the first plank now. It wouldn't hold a second bash. I had to get the second piece of wood in place or whatever was inside was coming out. I pushed down on the screw and pressed in the drill's trigger. Bit by bit, it sank into the wood until finally the drill bit skidded against the top. I waited. There was another hit, but the two pieces of wood held. No cracking. A moment of silence and then two. No more hits. I put another plank of wood on, and well as a few more screws to make sure that it would hold. Once that was done, I leaned against my bed and sighed in relief. The police would be here soon. I'd show them the cabinet, the video. It was going to be okay. I dialed my wife's number again on my phone. I was already forming the words I was going to say to her in my head. I'm on my way. We're safe. Nothing to worry about anymore. I heard her phone ring in my receiver, and then ring in the house. I stopped and turned. With each buzz, my horror grew. The ringing was coming from inside the cabinet. My wife never made it to the store. I looked all over, even in the back, for her. I demanded to see the store's security cameras, which they eventually agreed to show me when I told them my wife was missing. There was no footage of her entering the establishment. When the police showed up, they didn't believe me when I told them my wife was missing. I showed them the video from the night before, and they thought it was CGI. They asked about my mental history, and that was when I shut up. They told me to come to the station to file a missing persons report, and then they would look into it. They gave me funny looks as they went back to their cars. They left, and I was alone again with the cabinet. 20 minutes later, I got a notification on my phone. It was another video from the camera. I looked up and saw it was missing from the wall. I clicked play. The video was 10 seconds long. Everything was dark, but I heard crying in the audio. It sounded like my wife. I heard one word, "Please." Then the video went dark. My wife is in there. I tried calling her again an hour ago. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I have to hope that she's alive. Whatever is in that cabinet is taunting me, dangling her like bait. I think it wants me to go in. I need to talk to that weird cellar guy again. After that, I'm getting some supplies. Then I'm heading in after her. I'm sending this post to some friends. To those who receive it, if you don't hear from me in 24 hours, show this to the police. I included links to the video files in the email I sent. I don't know if they'll believe you or not, but at least try. After you do that, burn the cabinet. I left the front door unlocked. I'll let you know if I find her in there. Wish me luck. Story number 3. He's staring at me. He's always so quiet these days. Dinner is done. I don't feel like washing the dishes tonight, and I promise myself I'll do them tomorrow. I put them on top of a stack of other dishes where I promised myself the same thing. Sam doesn't seem to mind. He just sits quietly, staring. It's not an accusatory scare. It's a questioning stare. A question that has been growing the past few weeks. It's quiet in the hallway, outside our small apartment also. I like to come out here and look out the window at the stars, endless and all-consuming. Maybe we'll crash into one someday, and all of this will be just a blip. If no one remembers, did it actually happen? As I walk down the hallway, I listen to the echo of my footsteps and try to sing a song to the beat. A quick shuffle and a stomp to really drive it home, and then I'm dancing down the empty, echoing hallway, singing at the top of my lungs. No one pops their head out to see what's going on or to tell me to be quiet, but I stop singing and stand silently anyway, listening. I hear a computer whining and the thump of my own heartbeat, but nothing else. At the end of this hallway is a door I haven't tried yet. I open the panel and pull out the wires. Finding a player inside would be nice. Listening to music outside my own head would be a rare gift. Food would be ideal. We only have a few cans left inside the apartment. A weapon really would be best. I haven't decided yet on who I would use it on first. I touch the wires together and the door shushes open. Another apartment, bigger than mine. Maybe middle management sized. The living room is neat and beige. I move a throw pillow and sink into the couch. Maybe Sam and I should move in here. I'm assuming the occupants won't mind. I realize that is a big assumption as I stand and begin to walk through the apartment looking for them. I find them in bed, tucked under the covers. The husband has his arm over his wife, holding her close, his blue lips almost brushing her neck. I know I can't disturb them, but I still back carefully out of the room and close the door. In the kitchen, I find cans of food and load them into my bag, filling it as much as I can. I can come back for more later. The rest of the apartment turns up only the remnants of a happily married life. Pictures of the couple with who I am assuming is their children. Keepsakes, knickknacks, trinkets are scattered on shelves from travels. Nothing useful. They have books, though. I peruse through them and choose a crime thriller, shoving it into my bag on top of the cans. I've exhausted the useful contents of the apartment, and it's time to leave. I stand at the door, listening, ready to emerge back into the hallway. I'm satisfied that it's empty and head out, wishing the couple a small goodbye and thank you as I do. Halfway down the hallway, I hear nails scrabbling on metal, and I begin to run, my feet pounding in time with my heart. Looking back will waste time, and I plow forward, though my instincts are screaming to see what is coming for me. I've heard what happens to those who see and know better. At my apartment door, I grab the wires. I'm old hat at this now, and the door quickly slides open. I smash the shut button and slide against the wall as a crash shakes the door next to me, followed by more nails scrabbling on metal. It hasn't figured out the wiring yet. Sam is still quiet as I stack the cans with the rest. The book fell out as I was running. I'll go back for it later. My hands have stopped shaking and my heart is starting to slow. I'm tired, I'll write more later, but now I'll crawl onto the bed and sleep. Story number 4. The nightmare began with a familiar modern anxiety. I hadn't secured a PhD position, and for that failure, my parents abandoned me. I was sent away to our old village home in India to live with my uncle and his 3 cousins. The world there was bleak and oppressive. Unhygienic household, old furniture, and lack of essential basics. My days fell into a cycle of servitude where I was treated as a maid. The abuse was constant. They beat me, sometimes with withering words that stung more than their hands, and sometimes with actual blows. "Have you found a job yet?" they would ask, their questions laced with menace. A chilling realization soon dawned on me that something was deeply and dangerously wrong. They were planning to push me into the well or get me married, I clearly remember. That fear gave me the adrenaline I needed to run. I fled and found a hiding place in a crumbling, ancient archaeological site. It was a place of forgotten beauty, filled with intricate urns, faded tapestries, mysterious artifacts, gleaming jewelry, and ancient scrolls, a silent testament to a bygone era. There, among the ruins, the rules of reality seemed to bend. Time itself frayed, and I felt myself change, shrinking back into the body of my 8-year-old self. The world I emerged into was ancient, a place that felt like the Mohenjo-Daro or Harappa civilization. Mud houses stood dark against the sky, with no streetlights, only the flickering orange glow of lamps. The people were strange and unsettling, like angry, twisted zombies, their bodies adorned with gold jewelry but barely any clothes. Yet not all were malevolent. Some simply went about their business, and a few even offered hushed warnings as I passed. I was trying to hide and walk discreetly. In this terrifying world, a woman appeared, clutching a newborn baby and running for her life. "We have to run," she told me, her eyes wide with fear. "We are not like them, and they will kill us." Even as the twisted, angry mob of women surged behind us, chasing relentlessly, she seemed to possess a subtle, almost magical knowledge, employing quick, evasive maneuvers that suggested a deeper understanding of movement, momentarily baffling our pursuers. She handed me her child, her expression desperate. "You have to fly," she urged. "I can't fly," I protested, my 8-year-old voice small and thin. "I'm only a child." "When the time comes, you will fly," she promised before disappearing. The mob followed the woman and I fell unnoticed on the ground. With the baby in my arms, I ran until I came to a small river. As I scrambled along its edge, a flash flood roared through, and the water began to rise around me. I thought I would drown, but just as the water closed over my head, a strange buoyancy lifted me. I was flying, but not gracefully like a bird. It was clumsy and frantic, like the desperate flapping of a goose or a duck, just barely keeping me above the churning surface. I think my body still remembers the gravity, the force of water as a big waterfall apparatched. I almost cracked a smile. The water was murky, aquamarine, and a gray foam on the surface. Flying badly, I crossed the vast river where water stretched to the horizon. Guided by some deep intuition, I eventually reached what felt like the archipelago of Stockholm. There, in a moment of calm, I looked down at the baby in the basket. Its face was my own. Suddenly, a dizzying paradox clicked into place. The grown woman who gave me the child was me. The terrified 8-year-old running for her life was me. And the helpless infant in the basket was me, too. All three, the protector, the child, and the innocent, were all the same person. The moment I grasped this impossible truth, the dream shattered. The basket, the 8-year-old me, and the vast river all vanished. I was myself again. A 26-year-old collapsed on a riverbank and desperately trying to breathe. Then with a final jolt, I woke up, coughing and spitting out water, as if I had truly almost drowned. Story number 5. I have really bad teeth. To be perfectly clear, my mouth is a train wreck. Growing up, I had several accidents where I was hit in the mouth and either chipped, cracked, or completely lost a tooth. I didn't really play any sports, especially hockey or baseball. I guess I was just a klutz. By the time I was in the 3rd grade, I had been well acquainted with my local dentist's office. When every other kid in my grade was afraid of going to the dentist, it was like a second home for me. What with my constant emergency visits and weekly checkups, I had lost all my baby teeth pretty early on, and had spent quite some time with hardly any teeth at all. Once I got to middle school, I needed braces. My permanent teeth had come in extremely wonky and crooked. I had an uneven set of teeth, all different shapes and sizes. My orthodontist tried to make me feel better by telling me each tooth was different, because it came from my past lives. I thought that was batshit crazy. I was told that even after the braces, I would need a couple of different cosmetic surgeries to make my teeth appear normal. I already had low expectations, and wondered if I should just save money and either get veneers or crowns as an adult. The whole ordeal would be expensive regardless, and my parents' dental insurance wouldn't be able to cover everything. I was given headgear to wear around the clock, and at the time, that was pretty much hell. I had a strict routine to follow for my dental care, which took a lot of careful planning and time management. I could barely eat, especially if I was feeling lazy. I was already pretty skinny, so my mom found a diet plan of blended drinks for me to try, so I wouldn't become malnourished. My dental care consumed me, and I started having nightmares related to it. At first, it was little things, like forgetting to use mouthwash or accidentally removing my headgear when I wasn't supposed to. But the nightmares quickly grew more intense and began following me into my everyday life. The first time this happened was when I had a dream about neglecting to floss before school. Flossing is one of the most tedious steps in my routine, and in my dream, I didn't have time for it. As I was sitting in class, I felt a thick, warm sensation oozing from my gums and beginning to pool beneath my tongue. I was used to the taste of metal, but this was strong, like rusty coins. I gagged, and thinking I might vomit, I hurriedly left my seat and ran to the bathroom. I pushed open one of the stalls and spat into the toilet blood. I turned and opened my mouth to inspect it in the mirror. To my disgust, I saw that my gums were bleeding. It dribbled down my chin. I wiped it vigorously and tried to contain it in my mouth. I tipped my head back and attempted to swallow, but I couldn't will myself to do it, and ended up choking and coughing up the blood. It just kept coming, leaking out from every corner, every crevice of my gums between my teeth, and down. I was awoken by my teacher, who had come to check on me since I'd apparently been in the bathroom for a while. He found me lying on the floor by the toilet, and upon waking up, I immediately went and looked in the mirror. The blood was gone. Another time, I'd dreamt about one of my brackets breaking. This wasn't a big deal, as it's happened to me before, but as my mom was driving me to the orthodontist's office to have it fixed, I felt something pull in my mouth. Suddenly, I let out a pained cry as a bracket was ripped off. Before I could process what or how that had happened, more brackets began being yanked off my teeth by the tooth. My teeth were already extremely hypersensitive, and the sudden trauma being inflicted on my mouth in that moment sent every nerve into shock. My hands were shaking as I brought them to the sides of my face, my fingers twitching as I screamed. Bits of metal fell out of my mouth, along with drool and spittle. Some of the brackets were being stubborn and wouldn't come off so easily. The pulling and tearing were persistent, causing a few of my teeth to be forcibly twisted around as they were still burrowed into my gums. The pain was unbearable, and being unable to do anything to make it stop drove me insane. I awoke to my mom shaking me slightly and asking if I was okay. I must have dozed off in the car. These incidents were scarce, but each time I would experience something like it, I was left feeling deeply disturbed and questioning how much stress could possibly cause such realistic nightmares, if I could even call them that, considering they only really happened during the day. My parents decided to start taking me to see a counselor who suggested I was simply stressed about my teeth and gave me a list of ways to get my mind off it. This seemed to help in the beginning, but it wasn't long before things got worse. When I started high school, I had barely made any progress with my teeth. The braces had accomplished next to nothing during the 3 years I'd had them up to this point, and my orthodontist couldn't tell me exactly why this was. All she had to say was that because I had so much mouth trauma, it may take longer than the standard amount of time to fix my teeth. So, I had to continue living with the damn headgear. One night, I noticed something unusual while doing my dental routine before bed. Another tooth had come in on the bottom row, in the front. How hadn't I noticed it until now? More than that, how hadn't my orthodontist noticed? It was fully grown in and impossible to miss. I stretched my tongue over to feel it, staring at it closely in the mirror. Suddenly it began to wiggle. I blinked, thinking my tired eyes had imagined the movement, until it wiggled again, this time more aggressively. The sensation was accompanied by the sound of soft clicking at first. I gasped and covered my mouth with both my hands. I could feel the sharp root of the tooth moving around, wiggling back and forth, loosening itself in my gum. My ears erupted with the sound of high-pitched vibrations, grinding and scraping as the tooth kept rubbing against other teeth and their brackets. After a few short moments, I felt it swimming around in my saliva. Pointy and hard as a pebble, I immediately spat it into the bathroom sink. I stared down at the tooth, holding the side of my jaw in pain and disbelief. I thought I'd already lost all my baby teeth. Upon taking a closer look, I realized it was too big to be a baby tooth. More than that, I realized I wasn't even in a nightmare. I'm supposed to wake up from these things, aren't I? Nevertheless, I turned on the faucet and let the water take the tooth down the drain. Following this incident, I was scheduled for yet another orthodontist visit. She was polite at first, but seemed fed up with how often I was coming in with some insane story about my teeth as an explanation for the continuous damage that was being inflicted on my braces and headgear. My mom was upset and expressed how she didn't know what to do to help me. The orthodontist replied with a sly remark about sending an orthodontist to do a psychiatrist's job. While sitting in the car on the way back home, I was feeling around my teeth with my tongue when I felt another fully grown tooth. It was toward the back of the top row. My heart dropped as the moment I noticed it was there was the moment it began to wiggle. I tried to stay calm, but the feeling of the tooth shifting so vigorously, pushing and twisting out of the socket, made me release a muffled cry. Just as it happened the first time, the tooth eventually popped right out. I held it in my mouth, cleaning it off before spitting it out into my hand. It was smaller than the last one, still big enough to be considered an adult tooth, but it was wider on top than the previous one had been. I rolled down the window and flicked it out. This began happening regularly, and it didn't bother me after a while. It became like a routine. Sure, it hurt like hell in the moment, but all I had to do was bear the pain for a couple of minutes, then spit out the discarded tooth. Nothing more than that. It didn't make a huge impact on my teeth, aside from a few slightly damaged brackets and wires, so I couldn't complain too much. Each tooth was different from the other, but they were all undoubtedly adult teeth. In fact, they were similar in the sense that they were like my main set of teeth, all different in shape, size, and even color. Some were whiter, some were more yellow, and some were even grayish. Some were shorter, wider, taller, thinner, duller, pointier, etc. I wondered if I should start keeping them, and considering it happened almost daily, I decided I would. I was like some sort of biological anomaly. Maybe some prolific scientist or ambitious rookie would study me someday, or at least pay me a nice amount for a jar of my mystery teeth. I figured maybe this would be how I'd pay for my future cosmetic surgeries. I kept the jar in the top drawer of my dresser. A week later, I had 7 teeth in the jar. It was like clockwork. However, after about a month of collecting my spare teeth, I noticed something strange. The jar was looking a little too full. I counted each tooth, expecting roughly a number in the upper 20s, but instead found closer to 40. I was shocked. How did I not realize I had been spitting out more than 1 tooth a day? Had I grown that accustomed to it? I scooped the cluster of teeth back into the jar, quickly sealing it and placing it back in the drawer. I tried not to think about it until I felt that familiar sensation in my mouth. I spat a large, elongated yellow tooth, coated in blood and saliva, into my palm. I stared at it, blankly, before going to rinse it off in the bathroom sink and adding it to the jar. Later the next day, I was sitting during lunch period. I've had my braces and headgear for so long that I've found workarounds, especially with eating food. I was pretty comfortable with eating more solid foods, which I usually cut up into bite-sized pieces. I took a bite of the dry slider I got in the cafeteria, and as I chewed, I felt something hard. Holding it in my mouth, I swallowed the rest and spit it out onto the tray. It was another tooth, only hours since I spit out my last one. It was smaller, tinted gray, and more of a box shape. I was overcome with a lingering sense of dread, but chose to once again ignore it and try not to think about it. So I was spitting out more teeth than usual. Big deal. I've become so used to the discomfort and strangeness of it all that it doesn't bother me anymore. So, if it stayed like this, I assumed everything would still be fine. I just recently graduated and have currently filled 19 32-ounce jars with teeth. I lost count once it got into the thousands, which was a couple of years ago. The number of teeth I spit out in a day has wildly increased, especially in the past year. I've gotten into the habit of spitting out a tooth every 3 to 6 minutes now, but that only came about as a means of deluding myself into thinking I have some sort of control over the situation. I've resorted to holding teeth in my mouth, so I'm not spitting a tooth every time I breathe. I have to carry a jar around with me wherever I go. My mouth is in a constant state of disrepair, much more so than it ever has been. I've given up on fixing my main set of teeth, having thrown away the headgear when I became a junior in high school. I had the braces removed shortly after, insisting nothing could be done. I just wanted them out. I feel like that may have contributed to the worsening of my unexplainable condition. As I'm sitting here writing this, I feel them all around my mouth. The teeth. They're coming in by the minute, like flower buds ready to bloom, embedded deep in the trenches of my gums and along the roof of my mouth. Rows of jagged, misshapen teeth burrow into my oral cavity and have begun working down the very back of my throat. I can feel them growing and wiggling like eggs about to hatch. Even without the metal in my mouth, there's always a lingering metallic flavor caking my taste buds. Raw iron. I can barely eat anymore, so I hope malnourishment will kill me before this does. I can barely sleep either, as lying down has caused me to accidentally swallow more teeth than I probably realize. But even sitting up, with the teeth in my throat making it difficult to breathe, several have come out, and I've had to choose between swallowing and choking. I feel them in the pit of my stomach, the pile of teeth forming a small bump. It's kind of like a pregnancy. Maybe that orthodontist from my childhood was right. What if these are really teeth from my past lives? Whether that be my own past lives or others, these teeth could become like children to me. I'm constantly birthing them from my mouth, small and covered in blood. They're all-consuming, and I can't help but spit them out. Perhaps I should just detach my jaw and let them fall out. Keeping my mouth closed feels more like a chore to me these days anyway. Regardless of how I do it, I must not fight it, and I must not give up either. Surely there must be a reason why I was chosen, why this had to happen to me. I know I will die here sooner or later, but until then, I will continue to live out my purpose. Spitting teeth. You've reached the end, but the shadows haven't left you. If this story unsettled you, prove you survived. Like this video, subscribe to Spectral Shadows, and leave a comment with the part that haunted you most. The darkness is always waiting, and so are we. Until next time, don't turn off the lights.